Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through the home tenant-based rental assistance for the Second Chance Act Pay for Success program participants, and talk about the policies and the request for qualifications. Okay, I did not know I was muted, but we are going to go through the home TBRA Second Chance Act Pay for Success program for the program participants, and we're going to talk about the policies and the request for qualifications. So, first, I'm going to talk about the Second Chance Act. So, the SCA program, ICDA was awarded $1 million through the U.S. Department of Justice Second Chance Act, or SCA, Pay for Success program initiative to provide permanent supportive housing to approximately 30 to 35 formerly incarcerated individuals who have a substance use disorder. So ICDA is partnering with the Indiana Department of Corrections to identify PSH eligible participants exiting on parole in the following zip codes. So 46218, 46201, 46203, and 46226. And all of these zip codes are based in Indianapolis. Um, and IDOC data showed that these zip codes have the highest number of releases and the highest recidivism rates in the state. And IHCDA is also partnering with Edna Martin Christian Center, who will be awarded the SCA funds to provide supportive services for the participants. So the home TBRA funds awarded through this RFQ will be used to provide rental assistance to the SCA program participants. So kind of a breakdown of what each partner is doing. So um, the recipient will be awarded through this RFQ will be required to work with Edna Martin. So IDSC is the one who they will use the assessment tool to identify potential SCA participants and refer those participants to Edna Martin. And then Edna Martin will receive those referrals from IDOC, provide supportive services using those SCA funds, and they also will attend monthly case conferencing and data validation meetings. And then the recipient of this RFQ, they will collaborate with Edna Martin and assist with rental assistance, housing search, landlord engagement, and utility deposit assistance for the SCA participants. And now we'll switch gears over to the home TBRA portion. So the purpose of this program, the home TBRA is a rental subsidy that will help SCA households pay for housing costs. So those include rental assistance, housing search, landlord engagement, security deposits, and utility deposits. And while the home TBRA program does not allow for the provision of supportive services as an eligible cost, Edna Martin Christian Center will be working with the SCA participants to offer those supportive services to further ensure housing stability. And then the TBRA program provides rental assistance to low-income households to increase housing affordability, stability, and choice. And IHC has designed this TBRA program to improve the range of housing options for formerly incarcerated individuals and their households identified as SCA participants. Um, so this is operating more as PSH, unlike our regular TBRA funding, and the amount of TBRA funding or subsidy varies per household and is based upon the income of the household, the rent requested by the landlord for their particular unit, the household selects, and rent reasonableness standard. The TBRA assistance moves. Sorry, not doing well. The TBRA assistance moves with the tenant, and if the household no longer wishes to rent a particular unit, the household may take its TBRA and move it to another rental property as long as the term of the TBRA is not expired. And for the rental assistance payments may be made on behalf of the qualified household for a maximum of 24 months, which may be renewed. So the 24 months could be renewed if we award additional funds. Payments must be made directly to a third party on behalf of the household. The cost of inspecting the housing and determining the income eligibility and assistance level of the household are eligible for reimbursements as rental assistance or administrative costs. And then rental arrears cannot be paid with TBRA funds. And you can also use the costs of housing search and landlord engagement are also eligible. Security deposits. So the home funds provided for security deposit may not exceed the equivalent of 2 months' rent for the unit, and they must be paid directly to the landlord on behalf of the participant. For utility deposit assistance may be provided only in conjunction with the TBRA security deposit or tenant-based rental assistance. Utility deposit assistance may be used only for utilities permitted under our ICA utility allowance schedule, and that does not include telephone or cable or satellite television. And then ongoing utility bills and utility arrears cannot be paid with TBRA funds. And then for administrative costs, um, all the eligible costs can be found at that location, and that includes reasonable costs of the overall program management, coordination, monitoring, and evaluation, the cost of inspecting the housing and determining the income eligibility of the family are also eligible, admin costs, and then admin costs claimed against home TBRA admin award cannot exceed 10% of the overall award expenditure. And so for some ineligible activities, home TBRA cannot be used to assist a resident owner or of a corporative or mutual housing unit when the resident is recognized by the state law as a homeowner. They can prevent the displacement of tenants from projects assisted with home rental rehabilitation program funds. Cannot duplicate another form of rental assistance that lowers the tenant's rent to 30% of or less of the adjusted income. And for example, if the household is already receiving assistance under like Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, the household may not also receive assistance under TBRA. And for the down payment in lease purchase programs or to provide overnight or temporary shelter to persons experiencing homelessness. Participant eligibility. The subrecipient must collaborate with Edna Martin to utilize home TBRA funds to assist the SCA households with rental assistance, housing search, landlord engagement, security deposits, and utility deposits. And the eligible participants in the SCA program are households in which at least one member of the household was sentenced to parole in those 4 zip codes. So again, those ones are all based in Indianapolis. And households must have a gross annual income that does not exceed 60% of the county's AMI to be initially eligible for the home TBRA program. And households must have a gross annual income that does not exceed 80% AMI at recertification to remain eligible for the program. And for unit selection, the subrecipient must maximize housing choice when working with households to identify housing opportunities, so they cannot require TBRA assisted households to select units developed and or rehabilitated by under the home program or other affordable housing program, and they cannot require TBRA assisted households to live in units owned or managed by the subrecipients. Participants must be permitted to move out at the end of their lease term and take that TBRA assistance with them if the 24-month term of assistance has not expired yet. TBRA rental assistance can only be used to pay for assistance on rental units located within the state of Indiana. Sorry, my throat. But the unit must pass an initial and annual Inspire inspection as well. For the calculation of rental subsidy, the amount of monthly TBRA a subrecipient must pay on behalf of a household may not exceed difference between the rent standard of the unit size and 30% of the household's monthly adjusted income. And the rent amount that the landlord is requesting must be determined to be reasonable. The household must take a minimum tenant contribution of $10 per month. However, this minimum contribution can be waived if the household is determined to have a financial hardship. And then for payment standard, rent must be determined to be reasonable initially and annually to ensure that fair rent is paid for each unit rented under this program. The following factors should also be taken into consideration for rent reasonableness. So that includes location and age of the unit size, including the number of rooms and square footage of rooms, the type of unit, including construction type, the quality of the unit, including the quality of the original construction, maintenance, and improvements, and then any amenities, services, and utilities included in the rents. For leasing documents, there will be a lease, so there must be a written lease between the tenant and the owner that has a term for a period of not less than 1 year. TBRA lease addendum, so per housing home regulations, the lease may not contain certain provisions listed in Section 8 of the admin manual. And the TBRA lease addendum voids any prohibited language, which may be found in newer existing leases. There also is a rental assistance payment contract. So sub-recipients will execute these contracts with the landlord and the tenant, and the contracts outline the rental assistance amount, tenant share of rent, payment conditions, termination policies, etc. And then the executed copies of these documents must be in each participant's file and updated annually, if applicable. And then there also will be monthly reporting and claim submission. So subrecipients must complete the IDIS report form entry for all TBRA participants. The IDIS report form is available on our TBRA website and will be submitted with each claim. And for the claim submission process, funds are dispersed on a reimbursement basis through claims submitted at IHCDA online. Subrecipients must submit claims to IHCDA once per month, and then for more information on how to actually use IHCDA online and submit a claim and all the required documentation, we do have a partner's guide to IHCDA online. And then we also have HMIS reporting. So HMIS is a secure electronic data collection system used to determine the nature and extent of homelessness. Data regarding all individuals assisted with the program's grant funds must be entered into either Indiana Balance of State or Indianapolis HMIS. And IHCDA will determine the HMIS that the recipient will use based on the location of the project. And then recipients must submit all reports as requested by IHCDA, and any additional reporting requirements will be communicated to selected respondents. And then now just a brief RFQ overview for the OMTBRA for SCA program participants. So for scope of services, the respondent will receive a grant in an amount of 1.2 million to provide home TBRA and assistance with security and utility deposits to approximately 35 formerly incarcerated individuals having a household income at or below 60% AMI of those and those who are enrolled in the SCA program. So individuals enrolled in the SCA program will be exiting incarceration and seeking rental assistance in 46218, 46201, 46203, and 46226 zip codes of Indianapolis. The funding will be made available over a 2-year period. 600,000 will be available in the first 12 months, and then an additional 600,000 will be available in months 13 to 24 of the award term. The award term or period of performance shall not exceed 2 years or 24 months, with the effective date of home TBRA award agreements, and all funds must be expended within a 24-month period. And then for the selection process, evaluation of all qualifications will be completed by a selection committee consisting of staff from ICA, and the selection is at the sole discretion of the selection committee. Applications will be scored according to criteria described in Part 2, Section 5, and then applications which fail the threshold review will not be scored. Past award performance, including history of complying with federal, state, and local guidelines, meeting benchmarks, and quality of work performed will be considered, and any entity currently suspended, debarred by, or in default with IHCDA will also be disqualified. And then these award recommendations will be taken to the January 2025 IHCDA Board of Directors meeting for final approval. And then the minimum requirements for this RFQ has to be not-for-profit status, financial capacity to administer the program, including the provision of required documentation, complete compliant, proposal addressing all required items, and commitment to attend all required trainings, enter agreements, working with EMCC, and submit plans to ICA for approval. And then any applications that fail to meet the minimum requirements or the threshold review will not be scored. So for scored criteria, experience of respondent is worth 30 points. So that includes experience administering rental assistance, experience working with landlords, providing and or collaborating with service providers, addressing homelessness, and working with formerly incarcerated individuals. So if the respondent has no experience addressing homelessness or working with formerly incarcerated individuals, please describe instead your experience working with other vulnerable populations. And then for readiness to proceed, that is also 30 points. So this is demonstrated by a narrative that include landlord identification and recruitment plan, ability and willingness to collaborate with the SCA service provider, so Ed Martin, and then proposed program timeline. Program description is also 30 points. So that's demonstrated by a narrative including the capacity to provide housing assistance beyond the program coverage area if needed, staffing plans, and then strategies for obtaining client feedback and improving the program over time. And then description of key staff is worth 10 points, so that the identification of key staff will run the program, so you have to include key staff identification, resumes, and a brief narrative, and also a current organizational chart. So again, this is just a checklist of all the requirements for submission. So the qualification cover sheet and the certification of respondent, both of them are in the RFQ packet. And then not-for-profit status, financial capacity, narratives addressing all of the applicable questions for the following sections. So experience of respondent, readiness to proceed, and program description. Then lastly, description of key staff. So program staff, key program staff identification, resumes, narratives, and organizational charts. And then all of these responses must be submitted via email, and they can be in a PDF only. So my email's up there, and the deadline for this will be December 9th, 2024 at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And applications that do not contain all required forms or documents as listed in this RFQ may be determined ineligible for further consideration. And then that is my email, as well as Zach Rose's email. So if you have any further questions, please let us know and send them to our emails. Okay, let me stop the recording.